I'm your host, Scott Norton, and welcome to At Large. On this show, I talk to world-class creatives who use business to bring their ideas to life. We'll hear about their creative practices, their most interesting stories, and the lessons that will inspire you the way that they've inspired me. Today we sit down with my friend Eric Ryan for a conversation we had at an event for founders and investors in Montecito, California. Eric is the founder of Method Soap, OLLY Vitamins, and a new stable of companies he's co-founded to reinvent everyday categories with his signature sprinkle of magic. He shares his creative formula, how he fosters a healthy culture as a leader, and hot takes ranging from the importance of sustainability to English muffin pizzas. Please enjoy my conversation with Eric. You now go by the moniker serial entrepreneur. You are a serial entrepreneur in the classic sense with an S, but you use the spelling serial entrepreneur with a C. What does that mean?
It's funny when you start a brand, you kind of take on the identity of that brand. And so when I was Method, it was the Method guy or Method man, and took on Adam and I were like that was our identity. That's an easy story to tell. When you start attaching your identity to multiple brands, I had to figure out what's the umbrella, a really simple umbrella story. So I landed on cereal with a C, kind of a play off of consumer products. And the whole idea of being serial with an S, of a builder, entrepreneur, artist, and being inspired by those who are doing the same. Repeat offender.
And tell me a bit, for the people out there, a little bit about your background, like your career story. How did you end up here where you are today at this event, this wonderful event in Montecito? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I had some imposter syndrome up there because you look across that room, it's like there's a lot of really amazing people in that room.
There's a lot of hitters.
I thought anybody could get up there and give a keynote and blow everybody away. So I originally came out of advertising, which is like the foundation of my career, and the reason that's important is it created the blueprint for how I've become a serial entrepreneur. And really, what I learned to do in advertising is how do you identify a really big consumer insight or macro trend and translate that to creative execution. And so that's really been my foundation as a founder. It first started with Method, the eco-friendly soap company, and the insight there. And this is going back to the turn of the century, where sadly we're getting old. In 2001, when we launched, and it was based off of two big insights. One was lifestyling of the home. You look at a dish soap more than you actually use it. Nobody thought about these products as a form of self-expression of really designing your home and home decor. At the same time, when we launched Method, you could only buy a natural cleaner in a natural store. So you were asked to pollute when you clean or use poison to make your home healthier. And so we really brought together this idea of high design and deep sustainability into this product offering that ultimately was Method and continues to scale off of those.
And what year was that you launched Method?
We launched on February 28th, 2001, which was a pretty tough year to start a new company.
Yeah.
And we were early pioneers in this whole idea of creating a consumer product and trying to get mass distribution.
Yeah, you were really uh, part of a generational change, I think, in how people thought about brands, ushered in by that kind of like new millennium feel. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the whole idea of like building brands that were aligning with the mission and values of your consumer
Hmm.
versus, our competition of like you own a single attribute. So if you're Tilex, it's about mildew. If you're Windex, it's about streak free. So it was really the idea of like we weren't creating a single product. We were really creating a a brand that was about connecting with an audience at a higher level.
And so then continue on with Method.
Yeah, so after we ultimately sold Method SC Johnson, and I wanted to find out, like, am I good or just lucky? And I had the itch to do it again. And it was actually when we sold Method, my default position is happy. So I'm a pretty like golden retriever is probably my spiritual animal. And for the first time in my life, I was kind of grumpy and I couldn't figure out why. And I realized like so much of my identity was tied up in this idea of being a founder and entrepreneur. And I had a cozy job at that point of Method was on rails and it was owned by somebody else. And I realized I lost my identity as an entrepreneur. And so I set out to do it again. And that was with OLLY. So same thing, started looking at this like dog's breakfast of a category called vitamins and supplements. And before OLLY, it was all designed like not the cool new Birkenstock, but the old bad Birkenstock.
Hmm.
And the insight was millennials view health and wellness as a lifestyle pursuit. So we reimagined the vitamin as a lifestyle product. And then from there, just kept going with a couple new startups, including Welly. Both Ollie and Welly, we've exited out to Unilever, and they've just been great partners. But yeah, I kind of can't stop.
Great. Yeah, I know him well. And you've got some new businesses too that you've started.
Yes, well, you sold a business to Unilever as
Well, that's what
well,
I'm saying. Yeah, well,
and
yeah, but you've done it twice, so I can't put the C in front of my cereal yet. Yeah, and after Welly, you've started a couple new businesses since then.
yeah, I've shifted more to what I would call like a venture studio model. So, what I'm doing is I just get such a rush and a high out of creating brands from scratch. So what I do is I just continue to follow my model. I look for categories that I think are ripe. I create the concept and the brand around it, and then I pull together the capital and the team, kind of like what a showrunner does in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And then I take a very hands-on executive chairman role. I'm a founder, so I am working alongside the team building it. But I now bring in CEOs really early to drive the day to day. And so I've got two right now, cast, which is completely different what I've ever done before. We're trying to reinvent the experience of shopping for fine jewelry and turn it into something that's joyful versus intimidating. And then I co-founded a brand called Will with Serena Williams that's building what we call active body care,
Mm-hmm.
and that's about 1 year old right now.
Great. Well, you're a hell of a showrunner if you're pulling those kinds of teams together.
We're trying,
Yeah.
never easy,
Yeah.
as you know.
So all of your brands have a really strong visual appeal. Um, what was it in your childhood or in your story that enabled you to develop your aesthetic sense?
That's a great question. I was not known for my aesthetic sense. In fact, I remember my dad at one point telling me that I should probably pay more attention to how my little brother dresses for ideas, and that probably pissed me off. So it wasn't known. I didn't. It wasn't something that came naturally to me. But like one of my core passions, particularly as a kid, I was obsessed with. I raced constantly was sailboats, and
Mm.
sailing has such a beautiful aesthetic to it. And I realized, many years later, part of what I was so attracted to the sport of sailing was actually the aesthetics
Hmm.
of the boat. And it wasn't until I got into college that I started paying more attention to design, and then my first internship was an advertising agency in London that also had a nice design department, and that's where it just clicked for me. I was like,
Mm.
"Oh, I love the power of design and creativity." But I think the reason why I was such a late bloomer on it is I don't have any of those gifts myself.
Hmm.
So I had to learn how to really harness other people's gifts.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I was truly exposed to that and I got to go to work alongside artists and creatives that the light bulb went off for me.
Yeah, beautiful. And what advertising agency was that in London?
It was called Integrator. It was acquired many, many years ago. The reason it was called Integrator, this is back in the 90s, it was like the one of the first what was considered an integrated agency where they brought together the disciplines of both advertising, PR, design, all under one roof.
Okay, interesting. And also being in London probably also accelerated your aesthetic sense because what an aesthetic city, and the Brits also they love the kind of pomp and
Oh,
circumstance. And you would have been there in the era of
right.
like Paul Smith, right? I mean, the nice pinks and blues and kind of this femininity that is on top of the masculinity that I actually kind of see in your work.
Definitely, and I really loved retail there. I still do. Like when I do trend trips, London's always,
Yeah.
first stop in Europe.
Selfridges.
Oh yeah, Selfridges, Harvey Nicks, even Harrods. So I love just retail is still theater there. And the other thing too is like because retailers compete against each other so much more closely than they did in the US because of the
Hmm.
density,
Hmm.
there was such a emphasis on driving differentiation. And so packaging was just so much more considered there. Even private label is still light years ahead of where it is probably still today in the States. So you're spot on, like
Yeah.
being embraced in that environment, like really opened my eyes to the power of
Yeah.
design.
Marks and Sparks, one of the best private label references
Totally.
out there. Really, really great stuff.
Yeah. Well, like
Do
so
you,
Kensington. I mean,
oh, of course.
I,
Yes, of course.
I don't think I've ever
Yeah.
told you
Yeah.
this. My original brand name for Method was called Kensington House
Get out of here.
because I lived in Kensington.
I did
And
not
I
realize that.
love because there's this whole idea of like bringing lifestyle and was elevating it, and it was actually before we started to really hone in on like, holy crap, like this stuff's really bad for you too. And so the original concept for method was very much about the aesthetic and the design, and then we learned, and Adam joined me, we pulled in the sustainability, but yeah, I've got, like, first decks that it was called Kensington House, so
Wow. Wow.
we,
Because we were going to call ours the sauce method. um, but you don't have training as an artist or designer, like
No,
visual training.
no, when we
Yeah.
play my kids love playing Pictionary with me
Hmm.
because it's so pathetic what I try to draw, so no,
That's
I have
remarkable.
no talents
Well,
myself.
you're one of the best self-taught art directors out there.
Thanks, I bear no
Uh,
gifts, but
yeah. How would you describe your craft?
it's funny, it's taken me a long time to realize, like, I actually might have a craft.
You do.
And I think there's a couple things. One, and probably I've never been diagnosed, but I'm sure I'm ADHD and I probably have at least a touch of dyslexia if you ever watch me try to spell. And so I think because of that, I can make connections that other people can't see. And if
Mm.
you look at a lot of my work too, I bring together different ideas from different categories, and
Mhm.
I'm a little bit of a thief. So in the case of method, I really stole from personal care and brought it to home care.
Mhm.
I also stole from housewares. So, like, if you look at Method Designs, all the original ones too, they all look like vases because I was kind of pulling from that world of housewares. But then I was also pulling from personal care in the way that I was bringing fragrances and color and even language into what was otherwise these very conventional, harsh cleaners. When I did OLLY, I stole from the beauty category, and the idea of, like, that square jar with the white cap, and, like, I want it to look like it was a beauty product that just happened to be found in the nutrition aisle. With Will, like, I steal from, like, the world of athletic brands like Nike, and I bring into a pain reliever. So that's a big part of my model is seeing those disparate, connections, and then I'd say because I'm not super strong in one area, I can kinda balance what I call living in that world of possibility and feasibility of
Mhm.
being an artist and an operator,
Mhm.
and it's one that ideas are easy, as you know, as a founder. Execution's hard, and I can kinda balance those 2, and I realize that's part of the secret sauce, but the 3rd piece is, like, I love connecting people and putting them in a position to do their best work. I just get such a high out of that. Like,
Mhm.
I think you've been to some of our dinner parties or we're in New York, and, like, I just love getting amazing people together, and I get such joy when I hear they go off to do something cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the cross connection of ideas, of categories, of people, and feeling like you're kind of the arranger and sometimes the godfather of those relationships is really rewarding.
Yeah, and, like, you look at the I'm sure too with coming out of your companies, you see the ecosystem of people who go on to do things together, great. It just
Yeah.
that I think that's the ultimate legacy.
Yeah. Creatives often talk about stealing, right? There's that
Mm,
famous saying, good artists copy, great artists steal, right?
that's
And
right.
that's, I think, been attributed to so many different artists because they've all stolen it from each other. And creatives often experience a synesthesia, right, of different sensory input kind of crossing over. I mean, Nabokov, I think, some children have this, but he would see black and white words in colors up until his adulthood
Wow.
because of the way that his brain was wired. And I think that really creativity is so often seeing those connections that are kind of hidden in plain sight, but that others don't see. And you're almost painting with this palette. Now that you mention it, method does have this sculptural element, right? Like the
Yeah.
vases that you're talking about, just as it also borrows from personal care and these other categories. So really interesting to think about that synesthesia as your craft.
Yeah, and it's part of like, I think one of the challenges I always have is like this insecurity of like when I develop a concept, it seems so painfully obvious. I'm like, why has nobody done this before? Same thing with method. I was like, this is so, to me, it was so obvious that, of course, a soap that you use for your home should look like this, smell like this, where like it was just painfully obvious. But then it was like, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry with these huge multinationals. You're like, why have they not done this? Did you find the same thing too? I mean, with same thing with like ketchup. You're like, why has
Yeah.
nobody created a
Yeah.
better ketchup?
I think what I've experienced is often like the end result or the thesis has been thought of, right? Like
Mm,
better ketchup or better condiments or like premium soap. But what gets overlooked is zigging when others zag to solve the problem. So being the exact opposite of the category leader instead of trying to copy the category leader, right?
yeah,
And really diverging from what the norm is, that often gets overlooked. And so, sometimes, like, oftentimes those great ideas, they do feel fresh and new, but to solve a problem that other people have already solved before. So I definitely feel that.
Yeah, and have the guts to do it. But it's like the best ideas are like usually one little iteration off of where the category is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's hard to like get the confidence of like, how did I see this and nobody else did?
Yeah. Let's talk about the creative process and your creative energy, which you're always bubbling with,
Totally.
and you're always bubbling with energy in general. But I woke up the other day and just felt compelled to write down for some reason the conditions when I get my best ideas and when I get my
Mm.
creative ideas.
And what were those?
I found myself, well, the worst for me is in the middle of the day if you sit down at a desk to work and to come up with an idea or to do something. I can't do jack.
Right there with you.
So for me, when I'm moving my body, if
Mhm.
I'm either in a very intense run and experiencing the runner's high,
Yep.
if I'm walking, especially walking with someone, late at night when the whole rest of the world is shut down and I'm like in the zone listening to music
Uh-huh.
and I've already kind of started a task and I get into a state of flow. Um, and oftentimes when I'm thinking about kind of nothing at all, and an idea pops into my head.
Yep.
And so, creativity, it sometimes sneaks up on you, but you do need to create the conditions for being hit with a creative idea and solving creative problems. So, how do you create the conditions to have creative ideas?
First of all, it's not I mean, everything you just said is true for me. And there's obviously a lot of science around when we're in a state of flow where we move our body, our brain can work very, very differently. And I'm was when Ollie was in the Presidio, which is a national park in San Francisco. I had a rule of like if we didn't have to look at anything and it was no more than 3 of us, like it's gonna be a walking meeting. Because I
Hmm.
just like selfishly, I can think so much better when I'm walking and I'm in motion versus sitting at a desk. And same thing, like, I will, like I was telling you before, like, I'm getting more involved with, John Gray and Ghetto Gastro and, like, love what they're doing, and the board meeting last week, there's just a lot of, like, really complicated issues to work through, and I was skiing on Saturday, and within the first hour of skiing, taking notes on the chairlift up,
Oh, yeah.
thinking through, I worked out such clarity to send to them, like, "Alright, here's the plan."
Yeah.
And I realized, like, part of my process is, like, I just need to take it all in, and then I need to go do something that puts me in a state of flow, and it just, like, comes. Same
Yeah.
thing vacations, like, this new brand I'm launching soon, I concepted all of it on vacation last June, and, we're going on vacation next week, and I already got my list of things I'm gonna work on,
Hmm.
because I'll the clarity will just come,
Yes.
versus sitting at a desk. So the way I try to create the conditions too is like I'll push things back to the team as much as possible also to look at how many different ways we can either solve a problem, concept it. And I'm a big fan of also like that rule of like convergence and divergence. So when you're
Mm.
trying to create something or solve a problem, you start with like get as many ideas out, right? And then you narrow it down to a couple. Then you blow those back out, narrow it down, and you just kind of work that process through. I hate though a linear process
Hmm.
because you're getting smarter through a process anyways. And if you try to go to a linear process, it often spits out the wrong answer. It just needs to be a series of like working through iterations until you finally get to a place that you think is the right solution.
Yeah, it's a classic design thinking, approach is the convergence and divergence. So having space where you're kind of away from work in a state of flow, ideas will come to you. And
Yep.
when you know that you're on a kind of a deadline or you kind of need to work on demand, how do you create those conditions?
I do like, Robin Williams said that, like sometimes you just need a little pressure to crack open the idea.
That's right.
And I am the same way. Like we get close to something and the pressure starts to increase, probably years of procrastinating as a student. Like that just feels comfortable to me.
Yeah.
But part of like, and it's one of the things that's been lost in COVID where we're not in an office that I miss, but the most powerful way that I really were able to like I'm a big believer in prototyping. Like seeing is believing, right? And we just spend, I think, way too much in PowerPoint and putting things in triangle, calling it strategic. So when we pre-COVID, when we were all in an office, one of the big things I did is we would invest heavily in having all of like what I would call like the artists in-house. So product development, design, creative. And then our offices were filled with magnetic whiteboards. And I would force every little fragile idea to be out in the open so people could build on it. So we'd have war rooms and there's just in even the same way we present with retailers, we really lean into visual presentation and that prototyping process, making the intangible tangible, like, it shortcuts everything.
Hmm. It's one of the great tricks that we have played on ourselves as a society is, you know, working as a team by default is sitting around a table, right? Sitting indoors,
Yes.
right? My least conducive for big ideas. And then also kind of the tyranny of looking at like a Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint versus at what you're describing, like modeling clay, 3 dimensions,
Get
colors.
messy.
These are and they become play.
They do.
They become play is the
Yep.
other big difference.
And creating an environment where that play is welcome and people are building on ideas, and there's a sequencing to it. You gotta work far enough out sometimes that there's enough pressure off the team to play, and then use pressure when you need to finalize decisions.
Yeah. There's a saying that in life you meet people who are fountains and you meet people who are drains.
Oh, I love that.
And I think you are one of the most prodigious high output fountains in terms of positive energy that I've ever met.
I think it's the greatest compliment. Hear that regularly, and I don't know how I do that.
Well, that was my question though. So you meet the world with a childlike wonder,
Mhm.
and you create a climate of possibility
Yep.
for the people around you. I think you have a natural sense of abundance and optimism. How do you manage your personal energy? Do you have a pause practice, gratitude practice? Where do you think that comes from?
I think just part of it is just how I'm wired.
Mhm.
Probably more nature than nurture.
Mhm.
And it's something I take pride in that I can walk into a room in a meeting and give a spark or give energy, and I don't take that for granted. Um, I'm extrovert, like, just like I was telling you, like, I had a terrible night's sleep, which is rare for me last night, and as soon as I walked into that room today of, what, a couple hundred people, like, my energy just and when I walked on that stage today, like, but, like and then we walked out, like, "Okay, I'm tired again."
Yeah.
So I do feed off of other people's energy, and
Yeah.
I'm really I have a son, my middle one is, an introvert. He's like, "How do you get energy from people?" He's like, "They take it from me." And it's like, I don't know, it's there. But, part of it, I think is I try to make sure I avoid people who also are drains
Mhm.
and people who can give me energy back. I'm always feeding stimulus to myself. I can't like I thank God I have a wife who also loves going to random grocery stores in random countries.
I know
Like,
we'd both be done for if that
right?
wasn't true.
I don't care what country we're
Yeah.
in. I was like, we gotta hit the grocery
Yeah.
store.
Yeah.
I just take in a lot of stimulus of looking at retail. I'm constantly flipping through, like Pinterest boards. So I feed myself with a lot of stimulus, and then I think it helps me be able to share lots of ideas in brainstorming. But I don't know. I think part of it is just like I got lucky.
Yes.
Um,
I think that's a legitimate answer. Have you ever had a period in your life where you feel like that got away from you? Or that
Divorce, like that's soul sucking.
yeah.
But also, so like anything, when you go through tragedy, I went through a brutal divorce 10 years ago, and 3 young kids, and became a single dad, trying to juggle a startup. It was the greatest gift, and you look for the
Mm.
gifts. I have the most incredible wife. I have I got to raise my kids the way I wanted to, with my energy focused on them. But when you're in it, it just, in those moments of crisis that all happen in our lives, it's soul crushing.
Yeah. How did you get out of that?
I, just kept moving forward. I I've got a lot. It's funny too. Now I'm at the age. I got a lot of friends going through divorces. You probably
Mhm.
do too. Like they're
Mm.
starting to hit. Like kids get a little older, and so I'm so glad I can be there and support them. And the advice I give them, one is like rediscover who you are, and lean into the things that it's kind of a cliche, but lean into the things that really truly make you happy.
Mhm.
Um, because you're being free to be who your true self is. So go figure that out.
How do you value your own creativity? And how have you monetized your own creativity?
It's funny because like the value of I value other people's creativity because again, I don't see myself as creative. I'm coming to the conclusion I might be, even though I can't produce
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
myself. I go, AI is gonna be amazing for me because I
Yeah.
can just like prompt like what I want.
Yeah.
It's gonna be so I'm starting to like try to really figure that out. I think the next couple of years,
Well, that ability to
like,
make connections that other people don't make, I think we understand that in society as a form of creativity. right? And or
It
rather,
is. It is.
how do you
Yeah.
value your craft as you participate in things, as you create partnerships?
Yeah. I see, like, kinda going back to those 2 things, I see, like, when I'm on vacation in a couple weeks, I'm gonna be sitting on a beach with a notebook, and that is, like, and really trying to sketch out different different ideas at a high level, and then bringing in a creative, like I always say, I set up the assist, let the creative score the goal of
Mhm.
bringing it to life.
Mhm.
Um, so that's definitely, I think, what I value most about my creativity is I could walk into a restaurant in Bangkok and think about, like, how this could relate to a new food item for ghetto gastro, like, I love, like, I kinda walk through life with an imaginary camera around me, which I used to do before cell phones, of constantly photographing ideas, and I think it kinda trained my brain to, like, I almost look at everything as, like, what could that be or how that could be applied.
Oh, I love that
So it's a
imaginary
lot of
camera.
inspiration, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it, and then to your point of too, it's like building teams of artists and operators and building connections, whether it's a retail manufacturer, like, bringing those people together to see that vision, but then take it, not only bring it to life, but make it so much better than my original thought.
Mhm. Let's talk about that, about partnerships. What do great partnership look like for you, and what do you look for in leadership pairs, whether
Mhm.
that's for your own business or for teams that you back?
Yeah, let's start with the pairs part. I love your perspective on this as well, because that's the hardest part of building a business is putting the right chemistry and the culture together, because you need people who are on a similar frequency and can vibe with each other and like each other. But then you quickly can build a culture that lacks that necessary differentiation of skill set, mindset, and personalities to make it successful. And it's putting that right mix together of people who are very different from each other, but can work really, really well. Like I always call it, like, it has to be an ensemble team, right?
Mhm.
Like the greatest TV shows or ensemble shows that have longevity. And so I almost think a lot about it's like, how do you put together a MASH, a Cheers, a Simpsons, one of these, a Seinfeld, these great, and I think a lot about that, those teams and how they go together. And I love the process of, like, trying to cast
Mhm.
a really great startup team to work well together. And I think that's by far the hardest part
Yeah.
of a startup. How did
My
you
my
approach it?
perspective is I also am very fortunate to have stumbled into a partnership with my co-founder who we are very different and
Mhm.
we have highly complementary skill sets.
Yeah.
And so he's more integrator, I'm more visionary, kind of the artist operator parity that you talk about. What I think I would also add to that is you said something on stage which really resonated, which is when you have a partner, you don't want to let them down. And
Mhm.
it's a different feeling letting yourself down, which you almost get kind of quicker permission for than letting someone else down. And so, such an important factor in any like big long-term creative enterprise or running a business is the ability to not quit and the
Yes.
ability
Oh,
to hear no and kind of ignore it and work around it and just keep going. And so teams and founders that inspire each other to kind of dig deeper as it gets challenging and be like foxhole buddies with each other. And then the other thing too, and the artist operator, that's a dimension of skill set, but there's also about proclivities. Like I heard a great quote once that in every great romantic relationship, one person is the balloon and one person is the string.
ooh, I've never heard
The
that.
balloon kind
I
of
know
like
who's the balloon and string in
floats
my
up in
marriage.
dreams, right? And the string like grounds the team.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And when you're running a
And they
business,
need each other too.
they absolutely need each other, right? Like a balloon is both parts. And
Can't wait
so
to text my wife after
the
this and
other
thank her
part
for being such a great string in my life.
which which is really hard to, as an investor, it's really hard to kind of measure this and understand this as you're assessing a business from the outside. But I've experienced it in a creative pair in a
Mhm.
business is um, when one person is really up, the other person can bring equanimity and ground them, and when the other person is really down, then their partner has the ability, like no other person on the planet, right? Because you're
That's right.
fully invested and you're fully in. That's something that will make that pair last and be successful in the long term.
No, I think you're spot on, and, a founder relationship is a lot like a marriage, just without the makeup sex. And you tend to be attracted to people who have the qualities that you want more in yourself.
Yes.
And I think when that's done really well, like where what you guys had is finding a partner who truly possesses things that you know are your weaknesses, like
Hmm.
who's the balloon in the string. And I agree. I think that's the fundamental of a great partnership. And then to your point of like how do you extend that into like the way you work with retailers, manufacturers? I think one of my strengths is I like setting other like so many founders are so egotistical, right? And that's why they're attracted to go start a company because it's
Hmm.
really about what they believe in, what they want. And then you add in the toxic mix of the stress and anxiety of a startup.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, when they're scared or they're struggling, they just become even more like hardened, right? In the way
Hmm.
that they lead. And a startup is this iterative process. It's tough. You got to be able, constantly learning, adjusting. And you have to have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset to do that. But I think what I'm able to do is like, none of my brands are called Eric Ryan.
Right.
Um, it's really about setting up the team, the partner. Like I love setting up other people to get the reward and be the success. And then I just at the end of the day, I'm like, well, I own it. So that's all that matters to me is that it's successful. It'll reflect back on me.
And it goes back to creating that dinner party, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone else had a blast at the dinner party, and you architected the dinner party.
Yeah. It's
And I've always, in my time in knowing you, I've always felt that. Was there ever a time where you had a big ego, or you were driven by personal publicity, reputation, or couldn't kind of get out of the way of your own ideas?
I'm sure. I mean, with all founders, I'm sure. And if there was you interview people I've worked with, someone would have a moment
Yeah.
where
But what I'm hearing is you never had a big kind of come to Jesus where you actually had to like eat humble pie and that changed the way that you thought about partnerships or
no,
change the way you thought about work.
some of the feedback I've had over the years has been much more about when I truly believe in something, I don't always like I'll defer to the team sometimes more than I should.
Hmm.
And it's hard because if you're innovating, you're doing something that's never been done before. So it's easy to get insecure about it. And so I try to rely, on the collective wisdom of a team. When I look back at the biggest mistakes, my wife says as well, she's like, when you look at your biggest mistakes, it's because you didn't follow your instincts.
Sure.
And it's a balance. But I think I'd rather be the person who doesn't always follow their instincts and defers to empowerment of great people around than being the egomaniac that wants it done their way. Like
Absolutely.
they're just isn't fun.
Yeah. And you get obviously the long-term commitment of that team, and you also give other people a taste of what it is to be in the first chair of leadership
Yeah.
and own the decision. Um which is obviously a very healthy thing to exercise.
It comes from a place of insecurity, and at the end of the day, all I care about is the success of the business of the team, and that's where my insecurity lives. So I'd rather channel that energy into supporting everybody than and startups are hard. They're really, really hard, so you can't be too hard on yourself in the journey.
Yeah. There's a school of thought that says that brands are all about creating the me I want to be for
Ooh,
consumers and allowing people to
the me I wanna be, unpack
to
that. I think
step.
I've heard that before.
So the me I want to be is products that we buy are kind of bricks in assembling our own identity, right? So we see a
Damn,
lifestyle
that's good.
we see a lifestyle
Yep.
on an advertisement, right? A Veuve Clicquot ad, champagne on a beach. And deep inside our brain, what we understand is if I buy this product, then I live that life,
Yeah.
right? People like this do things like that.
We kinda sell props of a movie that people wanna be in.
Exactly. And people assemble their own identities through these products. I was talking, and so this word aspirational gets
Mhm.
used a lot. I'm sure you heard that word a billion times working in an advertising agency in London in the late
Yeah.
90s, aspirational, right? And so much of our era is about like trading up. I was talking to a founder of a business that you advised last year, Cami Telez from Parade, and unprompted, I didn't put this in front of her, but she said, it used to be about aspiration, but now for young people, actually, it's about self expression.
Mhm.
People aren't compelled by aspiration now. Instead, they're looking for tools for self expression. What do you think about that? What do you think about that dichotomy?
First of all, I love Cami, and I think I love what she was doing with Parade, and I think she's spot on, and I think that's really driven through social media. And there's so many more ways, especially for a younger generation. There's so many ways for them to express themselves that they couldn't before, and they have such a big platform. And that it's always that human need, right? To like stand out but yet fit in. And I think social media has really driven this need for self-expression at a level that it didn't exist before
Mhm.
because you're chasing likes, you're chasing followers, you need to be differentiated, and that's the medium to do it in. So I agree. There's different like societal values, right, of a brand. There's an inward and outward. Like I
Mhm.
drive a car because I drive it for how I want other people to view me versus I drive it because how I view myself. And I agree. I think that's been much more amplified. And also just like the democratization of everything, right? So there's less things to kind of aspire up to. You can choose to starve yourself, but drive a really nice car.
Uh-huh.
Like, um, yeah, I think she's spot on.
Yeah, it's interesting because with social media, you use this phrase like we're creating props for people for the movie that they want their life to be, and now we have cameras to shoot those movies
And an audience
and an
that's
audience.
a live
And
audience at
so
that.
so yeah, that's a very interesting kind of next Warholian level to I think those two ideas combined together. Um, in a recent interview, I was listening to you with Tim Gales. You talk about building a brand and looking at branding from quote unquote like the inside out
Mm.
and from a brand building a brand from a cultural perspective. How do you think about culture in the work that you do in the organizations you lead?
It's everything. I mean, I have a really fundamental, um, belief in startups, and this is not from me. I think, Jeff Rader shared this with me from Harry's and, Warby Parker, and he learned it from a professor at Wharton, but the whole idea of, startups typically will fail either because you don't have the right people, the right products, or you're not a good custodian of capital.
Hmm.
And my model has always been people and products. And so I fundamentally believe if I can get the right people and create the right culture and then really treat the products as a souvenir of that culture, then generally everything else is going to get a little easier. And when I look at, companies who've done this at scale, Apple, Nike, right? Like if you know anybody who works at those companies, like amazing talent and they make amazing products and they make products for themselves at the end of the day. And I feel the same way as like we should ultimately create products that we want and our families want, and our friends want, because if we don't want it, why would somebody else? And if you're going to really innovate, you have to lead the consumer. You can't follow them through research. So the only way to really lead the consumer is often be the consumer and create for yourself.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm a big believer of like everything starts with culture. And in the end of the day, too, everything else can be copied. You can't copy a culture.
Yeah,
And a culture allows you to constantly innovate, stay ahead. And
practically
I think that's the only moat today.
practically speaking, though, like more than just creating products for yourselves, what do you do to deliberately enhance or architect a culture, create the conditions for a good culture?
So a couple things fundamentally, and it's interesting. It's really changed a lot post COVID. We're not in an office. We're more remote. It's definitely a lot harder. So we've shifted a few things, but I would say the most important. There's a couple things. One, I mean, I would really try to design a rhythm to the company that was constantly reinforcing back to the culture. So, I'll
Hmm.
give an example. Whenever we go to hire somebody, and I started this at Method when I overheard somebody go, "I just need a warm body," and it scared the hell out of me. I was like, "No, no."
Yeah.
So, when I worked in advertising, I went to go to this job at Fallon, that was like the hot shop, and after all of my a couple days of interviewing, they gave me case studies to go do, as a homework assignment, and it made me want the job even more because now I had to work even harder for it. And so when I heard the warm body comment, I came up with this idea to slow down the hiring process by creating a homework assignment. And we've done it with every
Hmm.
person in every company ever since for the last 20 years. It's really simple. What we do is when a candidate finishes the process and you would normally give them an offer, we invite them to come back a week later to do their homework assignment. They're given 3 questions and they'll come back and present with the 7 to 10 people they interviewed with. But the last question is always the same, which is a culture question. And part of doing it is it's holding a mirror back up to the company and it's reinforcing what it means to be here. And also it's like this incredible it's a way to bring because everybody interviews differently. And it does a beautiful job of creating this transparent view on a candidate. Also seeing if the chemistry is really, really there because you learn so much about them when they start doing this process. And it's our way of making sure we always, as Jim Collins would say, get the right people on the bus. And then we do like in all of our company meetings, there's always like it was the money huddle at Method, it was the family lunch at OLLY, it's casting call at Cast. There's always a part where we do values awards, you write a letter, you share stories. So you're constantly reinforcing back to the culture
Hmm.
what's important. And as leaders, I think the most important thing is to just to be able to always constantly express like, no, culture really matters. It's amazing how few leaders actually do that.
Yeah, and it's so easy to say and talk about, but what you're talking about is I like this word rhythm, right?
Hmm.
Because it's the practices of we always do it like this, right? Discover some new technique like the homework assignment, and we always do it like this. I mean, at Sir Kensington's, we would give annual awards for each of our values,
Yeah.
right? And so proving that this isn't just words on a wall, we're celebrating these specific values. We're demonstrating and rewarding, what who is living these values. Those kind of rhythms that really rings true to me as a leader and creating culture.
And I love that because part of the creating the rhythm too is it's empowering your team by giving transparency and helping everybody see the same movie. And
Hmm.
it's amazing how many founders where everything lives in their head.
Yeah,
And that's a form of power. Either you're really disorganized or you're just playing games and like you're just holding on to the power because only you know the answers.
yeah.
And so what I love about everything from like we map out the entire year of and I use, board meetings as tentpole moments and like everything's mapped out. And it just the whole idea is to give everybody a sense of security,
Hmm.
of expectations, as well as like we write these annual operating plans that everybody in the company gets. So they all see like here's the playbook for the year. Here's our OKRs. In detail, here's what we're gonna go do as a team. And it just sets everybody up for success.
Yeah. And I mean, it's about creating something that is by default multiplayer, right?
Yes. I love
Like,
that.
and so like founders that live in their heads, because founders are often cerebral, they're
Uh-huh.
often introverted, creative, highly reflective, but that is fundamentally single player, right?
Yes.
And you're talking about having a comfort, and I think that probably comes from your extroversion too, is like default multiplayer.
I love that multiplayer. It is so true, and it's also like I coach other founders. I'm like, "You make your life so much easier."
Oh yeah.
Like, you get much better balance in than trying to, like, control everything yourself.
Yeah. Do you think psychological safety is overrated and that it creates a low bar? Or do you think psychological safety is something to strive for?
Can you have psychological safety in a startup? It's really hard.
It is
The
really hard,
the unknown, like
but it gets talked about a lot. And I feel like it was talked about more years ago that everyone focused on psychological safety as a platform to do great work and the importance of psychological safety at work. And I feel like more recently, I have both seen with my own two eyes and I've heard people say, you know what? In the Robin Williams quote, you need some pressure to crack the egg.
and with a startup, there's, like, things are never gonna go as planned. And so I agreed, like, I always try to create an environment where everybody feels a sense of a sense of security, empowered, they have a voice, the way we write our values, and but then the reality is when you start playing the game, you come out of the locker room and you're on the field and a product failed, there's you know, you have to, like you have to work through a certain level of uncertainty, and it is interesting, like, a lot of people say, like, "I wanna come join a startup," like and then they get into an environment that just naturally is gonna have a certain level of uncertainty, and it's really, really hard for them.
Yeah. Well, what you're describing, I mean, if I'm interpreting what you're saying, you do believe in the importance of psychological
For
safety because it's
sure.
how you as a leader treat people and the environment you're fostering. And what you're talking about is setting the expectation that the environment and the external forces are going to be difficult, idiosyncratic, unpredictable, not go our way, and prepare people for that. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like you do value and focus on psychological safety.
For sure, you have to support each other, and, like, the work we did with Ali and mental health and, like, absolutely, it was, like,
Yeah.
support because it is so hard, and there is such uncertainty and ambiguity, and you have to embrace it, and also, we're really transparent with our teams, like, everybody knows the financials of the business, um, we trust them with that information, and it's a lot, especially for junior employees sometimes, it's a lot to ask of them to have to be able to, like, know, like, "This company needs to raise capital by this date," or "This isn't working." And so trying to create an environment where people can thrive in that is always the priority.
Yeah. What have you learned about how people care or don't care about sustainability in your 24 years running companies, building brands? with sustainability as a theme running through them.
Mhm.
How does it fit into the psychology of a product?
So what I'm a big believer, you've gotta hit the intersection of narcissism and altruism. So I'll give method as an example again. People would buy method because for very narcissist reasons. They love the design, they love the fragrance, the efficacy, things that were selfish to them,
Mhm.
but then the altruism of like, this is better for you and better for the planet. And what I loved about that too is you'd bring in people who really didn't care about design, but they loved about the environmental credentials. You had people who could care less about that. They brought in the design, but it would really create this like, change because we're getting more and more people to remove toxic, detox their homes
Mhm.
and get toxic products out of their homes. But I've always found, like, if you don't lead with narcissism, you won't have an impact. So we did this years ago, we did this collaboration with Whole Foods where we created it really was the first ocean plastic
Mhm.
bottle, and I'm so like, anything we do when it gets copied by other people, like, that's
Fantastic.
awesome. That
Yeah,
is, like,
yeah.
that's what we want.
Especially that one.
Like,
Yeah.
otherwise you're like total hypocrite.
Yeah.
And we've had especially in Method, we had a lot of those where we created ripple effects across an industry, and that's really what we cared about. But we didn't lead with like, we pulled ocean out of the plastic. The campaign I created was Save Sushi
Uh,
and made it super selfish.
Save sushi.
Exactly. Like you may not care that there's plastic in the ocean, but you probably care about your sushi.
Right.
And so that was just an example of keeping it like, very, very like give a narcissist reason for, but I fundamentally believe that you've got to get that balance right to really have an impact. Adam and I always talked about Method as a Trojan horse for good.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, like, our government's gotta step up. Like, I don't know about you, but it is crazy to see the amount of waste that comes out of every house, including mine, every week, and, like, where is all this going?
Mhm.
And there's just a resin tax on plastic would be so easy to do. Single-use like, it just there's some very, very simple moves that would actually open up industries, help the consumer, but until, like, these problems have to be solved with some government intervention.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen through consumerism.
Because the truth is that there is a limit to how you can create those brilliant connections of narcissism, right?
Yeah.
There's certain hidden categories and products where there is a limit to that. Do you
Especially if it costs more,
Yeah, well,
because a lot of times it
precisely,
does
and
cost more because the supply chain is
most
not
often,
optimized.
yeah. Do you think that we're moving forwards or backwards as a society when it comes to sustainability and people caring about how their actions impact that?
I had a lot more hope earlier. I feel especially seeing EV sales start to slip, again, why is every gas station not required to have at least 1 charger for every 4 pumps?
Yeah,
Like, you're polluting like, we should not be allowed to pollute for free in this country or anywhere in the world. And so I've like, I thought we were on a much better path 10 years ago than I think we are now. I feel like
yeah.
we're starting to slip back.
I feel like there was a lot more optimism
Yeah.
but to your point earlier, convergence and divergence. I
Yep.
mean, it goes in waves. So,
And I think the generation coming up, Alpha, is, like, much more hardwired into that
yes.
as well, with climate change
Yeah.
shouting at them in their phones every day and headlines,
Well,
so
that's what kids' books are about these days.
totally.
You know? I mean, we didn't have that, you know? That Harold and the Purple Crayon wasn't necessarily like a non-toxic, plant-based crayon that I was playing with. I have here a book that you wrote.
Uh-huh.
I read this book probably 10 years ago. It's a fantastic book that I highly recommend. The Method by or by Eric Ryan and your partner,
Adam
Adam
Lowry,
Lowry.
yep.
And there's a line in it, if I remember correctly, that said something like you hired Kareem Rashid for the industrial design of your bottles, and there was a moment where Target, right at the time, was known as Target, was trying to be very design forward, and so um, they wanted Kareem Rashid, and your product was designed by Kareem Rashid, and so you were able to kind of have this like transmutive property, and so therefore they wanted you. Is that true?
Yeah, so we did the very classic startup story, which is, we went to all of our local San Francisco Bay Area independent grocery stores, sold in the manager at 6 AM, hand delivered it, built a little proof of concept. I mean, really learning how to like how do you sell a product in, and it was very, very hands on, which was like great learning. We then parlayed that into getting some regional chains on the West Coast, like Albertson Safeway, and then I think we were up to about 800 stores on the West Coast. But there was no way this business was going to work without a national player to give us scale.
Hmm.
We had like almost no margin, and obviously Target was the right choice, more premium, great design. And we had an initial meeting with the buyer who literally said snowball's chance in hell. Didn't like the name. I was like, "You're Target. I do not like Method." Didn't like the design, the bottle. And so, he finally looks at us. He's like, I hate to say it, but he's like, it's a snowball's chance in hell. So we were like dumb and dumber. Like, so you're saying there's a chance? And we had just done our Series A, and like as an entrepreneur, like there's the road backwards looks way scarier than the road forward. So we were like, all right, we got to figure out how to do this. It was just by
Huh.
coincidence. We were working with Karam and working on our first line of products. They were doing the Philippe Stark Design for All campaign, and I knew they had an interest in Karam. So I used Karam as a carrot to get a meeting with marketing, who then invited the buyers who were super annoyed we went over their head. And we presented our vision, and it was really I was like, if this was gonna work, I was headed to grad school in London to, like, go hide and lick my wounds and learn from my mistakes, and we
This was
got
existential. Everything was on the line.
oh, everything was on the line. There was no way it was gonna scale without it, and we got really lucky, so the buyers agreed to a 90-store test, gave us metrics we were never gonna hit, so we were failing this test. I'm driving around all of Chicagoland, like, cleaning up, because our products were leaking too, our first dish soap, and with any success story, there's so many elements of luck, but one of them was a new buyer came on the desk, Cheryl, and she loved how incremental, differentiated it was and gave us national distribution. And, Method many years ago passed the $100 million mark in annual sales at Target. And
Wow.
I don't know where it is today, but it's obviously a huge brand there. And we use that to then extend it to other retailers.
And so now you have a special relationship with Target as an individual. Um, what is the role that you play after all these years, and how has that role and that exposure to a retailer and merchandiser informed your craft?
Yeah, coming out of advertising, I didn't know how to sell, but I knew how to consult. And so I'd always I just kind of relied on what I knew, which is how do you go in and treat somebody like a client? So I treat Target as a client. And I
Hmm.
still today at any retailer, I don't try to sell to them. I try to go in and advise. So we'll go in with multiple options. Really, I always love that phrase, like go in not to prove yourself, but improve yourself. And if you take
Beautiful.
that approach, you disarm the buyer. They're much more likely to collaborate with you. I always treat like,
Oh
when we
yeah,
present, I was like, it's a debrief. Like, all right, here's what we learned. Here's where we think we could work. Here are options, and so I still really work with retailers in that way, and then my secret sauce is creative, you know?
beautiful. And
You
take
know
the sales pressure off.
Totally,
You disarm by taking the sales pressure off, and all of a sudden you're activating a totally different part of the buyer's brain.
and I learn, I spot opportunities, and
Yeah,
that's why I'm very retail centric. I like to be people are like, "You don't need to come to this meeting." It's like, "I know, but I'm gonna be the one sitting there listening to the buyer for an opportunity,
yeah,
and then be like, "Hey, I love what you said. Would you mind if we concept something, come back in 3 months and show it to you?" And they're always like, "Sure."
of course.
But salespeople generally, like, they have a job, which is to sell. As a founder, you have a job, which is to build.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I know, I kinda like how I landed that. It's good,
Yeah,
right?
nailed it. So with this show, we want to do something a little different, have kind of some variety segments
Mm.
and including some hot takes. Starting with a quick hot take. Are you glad social media exists, or do you wish it never existed?
Oh, I hate social media.
You hate it.
I hate
So
it.
you wish it never existed?
Yeah, I don't ever feel good when I post something.
I'm the same
I'm like, "Did I
way.
brag,
I
or was
look
that dorky?"
when
Right?
I
Like,
watch movies that like take place in the 70s and 80s, I'm just like, I want to live there, and
like,
not be, on display all the time and also just competing with the noise. So
totally.
it's a very interesting dynamic, like how our society now. The other day, my phone died. I was at a restaurant, so I didn't have my phone to look at. So I was looking at other people. They're all on their phones.
Totally.
It's unbelievable. So related to that, you have kids. Yeah,
3,
your kids are how old?
18, 15, and 13. Girl, boy, boy.
So in this segment, everyone's a critic.
Mhm.
What do you think about Mr. Beast?
Oh, I love Mr. Beast. I watch it with my boys all the time.
Tell me why.
I don't get the formula. Like, I'm blown away. When you watch it, it feels, like, so random and just haphazard. But then I don't know if you read the stories on him, like, he's so methodical and everything is so well thought out, and he'll
Yeah.
spend $1 million on an episode and then just scratch it because it wasn't right. And so the amount of thought and care that he puts into his episodes, but yet they come off as like a couple of people with a video camera throwing this thing together, it is incredible.
Oh
But the
wow.
way it's
It's like
caught
Jackson Pollock.
oh, yeah. And it's caught my kid, my boy, my youngest one love it. We watch it religiously, so I've probably seen every episode. And then he parlayed that in a CPG and a chocolate
Yeah.
with Feastables. Um, super, super impressive. I still don't get the formula. Um, Maybe he doesn't either.
Yeah, no, but you appreciate the craft. You
I
appreciate the work. Yeah.
totally get it.
Yeah. And the message, whatever message that is, it's you can kind of huddle around the screen with your family and enjoy
Yeah,
it.
I do love his giveaways. I think that's like there's like this intersection of like it's very heartwarming
And talking about altruism
with
and
like,
narcissism,
oh
right?
yeah.
Because he's giving away, like, the more money he gives away, the more views he gets, and it's a spiral. So we have a segment called "Explain This to Me,"
Mhm.
and don't be afraid to go really deep and get really nerdy on this. Ollie and Welly and Will are public benefit corporations. Method is a B Corp.
Method was the original B Corp.
Yep.
We were one of the founding B Corp members. That was all Adam. He's like, we're gonna be a B Corp. I'm like, sweet. What is that?
So
When it was
explain.
acquired by SC Johnson, they sadly pulled out of it.
Uh, but it was a
But
B Corp for a long time, and it was
yeah,
a leading B
we had
Corp.
the highest B Corp score. Like, and we didn't do it because it was for it was the whole idea of like, not what can you do for your country or country could do for you, what you could do. I thought the same way B Corp. It was like we thought B Corp was important to set the example to encourage other companies to follow those practices, not like we wanted to brag about it.
So for listeners out there, from the basics, what is a B Corp? What is a public benefit corporation?
Yeah, so the whole idea of a traditional corporation basically means you have a legal right to serve your shareholders' fiscal responsibility. So you could like doesn't happen,
Legal
but
obligation.
yeah. So theoretically, if you did something that would erode profits but was better for the environment, your shareholders could sue you because you have a fiscal duty, to deliver an economic return. B Corp's really built around the triple bottom line and being not only running a great business but being great custodians of the planet and people of the planet and social value missions. So it's a way to say we've committed to not only taking care of our shareholders but taking truly care of the planet and the people on it.
And how does one make the distinction? Like how can you go about like changing the law?
How they did it
Well, no,
with creating.
if a company wants to opt to be a B Corp, where's that actually
Oh,
inscribed?
yeah, I can't remember the exact part because we just like all of our companies since Method,
Yeah, your
we
lawyer knows
just
at this
just
point.
started
Yeah, you
exactly.
don't need to
We're
tell them.
we're a Delaware B Corp. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Make us a Delaware B Corp.
yeah.
Now they do have it's a lot of work, and we have somebody who's usually dedicated to it. There's different points you get. There's audits, and you can start off B Corp and you become B Corp certified. It does bring a fair amount of work alongside it, but it is so worth it. And I find too, it's a really great way to keep everybody aligned
Mm.
behind what we think really matters to have social and environmental impact because it's a good forcing mechanism for it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you get to rely on another organization to figure out the measurement mechanisms rather than your own kind of you can argue endlessly about the internal measurement mechanisms for that.
Totally.
Yeah.
If we get consumers to really support B Corps over other forms of corporation, the whole idea is we'll get more and more companies to come on to that commitment. And that, I think business, back to what we were saying before with the government, but really does need to step in on some of these areas. But business can be a really powerful agent of change.
Yeah, that has been charging forward, and not
Hmm.
without some controversy.
No,
But it has been charging forward, and I've been pleased to see that. Uh, do you love food? I've noticed that you love food. You're always thinking about, oh, where can we go to dinner? Hosting dinners.
which
Do
is
you?
ironic because I can't cook.
So do you cook?
No, I make great reservations.
Okay. Well,
In fact, if I said I cook well, my wife would just, yeah.
let's. But there are
But
times.
someday I'm going to do it.
Oh, and I can teach you. Wait, by the
That's
way, I
great.
love I love teaching cooking, and I love to cook. But there must be a recipe, like what's your go-to? Like if you need to cook something, even for sustenance, what do you throw together? And could you give us the recipe on air today?
My go-to for my comfort food for like a lunch or if I'm home alone dinner is English muffin pizzas.
And tell me the recipe. How starting from beginning? How do you make an English muffin pizza?
Take an English muffin, put pizza sauce, Tabasco, and cheese, and that's it. Like, I love.
Cook it at what 375
Oh
or
yeah,
toaster oven?
toaster oven,
Beautiful.
350. I've been doing this since probably the second grade. It's my comfort food. My
Yeah.
wife laughs at me, but yeah, I'm on the board of Goodles, Ghetto Gastro. Like I'm on the board of Mix, Flour and Water, the big legacy restaurant hospitality group. I'm around a lot of culinary, but if you asked me to make an amazing meal, I would struggle.
What is your media diet?
I love I still love things that have a start and an end.
Mm,
So, Wall Street Journal, but I read digital, like, on my iPad. So,
sure.
I still love magazines on my
The
iPad.
Journal is great
I love
reporting.
Wall Street Journal. I've got New York Times app. Um, I do get lazy and I go to Apple News, but it freaks me out because it constantly puts things in my feed that, like,
Yeah,
are
you can't
just
let the
like
algorithm no.
yeah, and I can't
Even
figure out
Apple, I'm actually shocked about how kind of Us Weekly Apple News
right?
is. It's bizarre.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
Feels like
really
BuzzFeed.
yeah, it's really but you know, it could never so I tend to like Wall Street Journal, and then I've got like Business of Fashion, Women's Wear Daily, like
Okay, the
all of the
trades.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
everything in my iPad. I like the bigger format, and I read a lot of the trade mags. I mean, I spend some time on Instagram, probably too much time on TikTok,
Oh,
at
TikTok's so
night. Like,
good.
I just love
Yeah.
like at night, like that's selfish. Like, sit there for 20 minutes, like.
Yeah.
But it's like, and the algorithm is fun. What it does
Oh my gosh, it's so
serves
fun.
you up.
Yeah, it knows your brain better than you know yourself, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but not nothing really earth breaking
Yeah. Okay, cool.
on how I think about media.
Um, what's the legacy that you hope your work leaves on society?
Damn, a big one. A lot of it is just want my kids to be proud, of my grandkids someday to be proud. Doing work that you're proud of. Um, I think the impact we've had so far is I think really inspire. When you think about what we did with Method, and like there was no, and a lot of what you did earlier with Sir Kensington, it's like we were the original brands that started building around this idea of serving a customer through mission and you know societal values. And I think for me, the other than kids being really proud, hopefully, is continuing to inspire other founders to build businesses that have a positive ripple effect. And as I just really enjoy coaching and working with other founders, and I think that's the it. I take way too many calls from startups and founders because one, it reminds me of where I came from. Two, a lot of people helped me on the way, so I want to do the same.
You gotta pay it forward.
Yeah,
You
and
gotta pay it forward.
it can be a lot of hours in a week talking to founders. But I feel like that's probably one of the biggest ways I can have a positive impact.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You and I
I
have talked about that. I was like, how do you balance it? Because like I get flooded with requests, which I
yeah,
love, and I want to help them all.
it gives me energy and again, I like my walking meetings and so I do those. Well, thank you, Eric. It's been such a pleasure. You're such an inspiration, so eloquent, and I look forward to continuing to partner and learn with you.
No, likewise. Thanks for having me on as the first guest, and can't wait to see where this goes.
Great. Well, thanks everyone, and enjoy at large.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to At Large. Today's episode was produced by Sickbird Productions. Our theme song is Son of Sanford by Motion Worker. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and by email at atlargeshow.com. Follow me at SWH Norton on Instagram and Twitter, and DM me about the guests you want to hear on the show.